Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is jam and coconut sponge. The list of bits you need are on the screen, but I have my bowl, my scales, I have my spatula, a spoon. Also you'll need vanilla essence, you'll need some jam. I like the cheap jam for this from Asda. Also you need butter, caster sugar, also desiccated coconut, self-raising flour, and over here I have my baking tray, which is lined with greaseproof paper. And yeah, I can't be bothered really to get my mixer out, so I'm going to use just my hand mixer. Oh, and you'll also need some eggs and some milk, and I use skimmed milk, but you can use any other alternative if that's what you like. First of all, I take my butter, which I've left out to soften, and you'll need 200 grams, and add this to your bowl. It's a lot easier if it's softened than trying to beat rock solid butter. If you prefer, you can use margarine or any alternatives. So there's my 200 grams in the bowl. Next, I'm going to take my caster sugar and also add 200 grams to the softened butter. Next, get your mixer and mix that until it's light and fluffy. And like I said, I decided not to use my KitchenAid and just use my hand mixer. There you go. So you mix that up until you get it as light and fluffy as you can and the sugar's all incorporated. Next, you'll have to get a jug and your eggs. Quick tip, keep your eggs at room temperature for this because it stops it from curdling when you add it to your mixture. So I'm just going to get my 3 eggs and break them into a jug and give them a quick whisk with a fork. Now this is the point that I like to do things a little differently, and I will take my vanilla essence and I will add it into the eggs and then give it another quick mix. Now my mum used to add a little bit of allspice into the eggs. Some people say if you add spices, add it into your flour because it's a dry ingredient, but I actually like to mix it in with the eggs. Also, this is where I will weigh out my 200 grams of flour. I weigh this out now because if I do manage to get any egg that curdles, adding a teaspoon of the flour into the mixture will stop that from happening. Now I get my mixer again and my butter and sugar mix, and I add in the eggs in 2 halves, mixing well in between each one. I use my spatula just to make sure I've got all the mixture from around the edges and that everything has been incorporated properly. Next, I tip in my self-raising flour. I did sieve it into another bowl and then back into my little Dora the Explorer bowl from my daughter. I start to mix it in with my spatula, but not mixing it all the way because I don't want to overmix my mixture before I add anything else. Next, I weigh out 100 grams of desiccated coconut, tip that into the bowl, and then you can finish mixing until everything is mixed in properly. You don't want any little pockets of flour or little pockets of coconut that hasn't mixed in. It's quite a stiff mixture, but this is where the 3 tablespoons of milk come in and loosen it up a bit. Give that a mix, and then you can see it's a lot looser now. And it's ready to go into my baking sheet, which I've lined with non-stick paper. Quick tip, if you put a bit of butter underneath the baking paper, it will stop it moving around so much when you're spreading it out. You can use a spoon or a knife, but I like to use an offset spatula. Get that all nice and flat and spread out into your tin. Then I'll use the tip of the spatula just to make a little dip in the middle to help it rise evenly. And who can't resist a little bit off the spoon? It is for family after all. Then place it into an oven at 160 degrees, fan, and bake for 20 to 25 minutes until it's springy, and if you place a knife in the centre it comes out clean. This is the time I give everywhere a bit of a clean and put the kettle on and have a cuppa. There you go, it's out the oven. I've turned it over onto another piece of greaseproof paper, and that way you get a perfectly flat base to put your jam on. And my kids and my husband like to have the crispy bit that you get on the top from baking on the base and not on the top. Now, to make spreading it easier, put your jam into a bowl and give it a really good stir, which will loosen it up and make it easier for spreading. There's no exact measurements for this, it's about half a jar. But if you like jam, use more. If you don't like too much jam, use a bit less. But I remember when I was at school, there was never enough jam on the sponge. So I place it in the middle of the sponge, and using my offset spatula again, I will spread it all over the cake. And remember, get it to the edges and the corners. There you go, completely covered. Next, you get the rest of your desiccated coconut, and this is where you sprinkle it all over the top, making sure you cover it completely. Also handy why there's an extra piece of greaseproof paper underneath to catch any excess bits that you've got over the edges. Make sure you do this while the sponge is warm. And then once the sponge is cooled, you can cut it into squares of any size that you like. I managed to make 20 squares out of this one sheet cake. Serve it with anything you like, but I know my lot are going to have it with some homemade custard. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.